The United States has just recently done something many thought impossible. In January, American forces captured Nicolás Maduro in Caracas without losing a single soldier. After that, a much bigger question followed. Who could be next? If the US could seize Maduro in the heart of his own capital, could it try something similar in Moscow? To understand how such an operation could even be attempted, we have to look at how Maduro was taken. Operation Absolute Resolve was not a simple raid. It combined stealth aircraft, electronic warfare, and special operations forces. Delta Force led on the ground, backed by the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the elite helicopter unit that operates deep inside hostile territory. A key part of the mission was a highly classified electronic warfare system known as the discombobulator. According to U.S. officials, it effectively blinded Venezuela's air defenses, shutting down radar and communications and preventing missile systems from locking onto targets. In practice, this created a temporary bubble of air superiority without having to fight through every layer of defense. If Washington ever tried something similar against Putin, the technical challenge would be far greater. Russia's air defense network around Moscow is among the most advanced in the world, centered on the S-500 Prometheus system. It's designed to track and intercept aircraft, hypersonic missiles, and even objects in low orbit. However, real-world performance is not the same as theoretical capability. In Ukraine, the S-500 reportedly failed to stop certain high-speed, low-altitude missiles like the U.S. ATACMS, long-range precision missiles. That suggests the system can struggle against complex multi-directional attacks, especially if its sensors are disrupted by advanced electronic warfare. The U.S. plan would probably follow the same playbook used in Venezuela. First, a broad cyber and electronic campaign would target Russian radar, communications, and military command systems to punch holes in their air defenses. Satellites could disrupt radar signals and the secure digital links that connect different parts of the Russian military. At the same time, stealth jets like the B-21 Raider and F-22 would push into Russian airspace, while EA-18G Growlers, aircraft designed to jam enemy radar, worked to blind and overwhelm Russian sensors. Only after this shaping phase would a ground element even be considered. That's where Delta Force and the 160th SOAR come in. Their mission would be to slip through gaps in Russia's defenses, reach Putin's location, secure him, and get him out before Russian forces can organize a response. Easy, right? In theory, the military creates the opening. Then, U.S. Marshals, backed by the FBI, could formally make the arrest, framing the operation as law enforcement rather than an act of war. That distinction matters politically and legally, even if it would still be highly controversial. But all of this depends on one critical assumption, that the US knows exactly where Putin is. And that brings us to the next layer of complexity, where he is. A direct raid on the Kremlin is the most ambitious option, but also the least realistic. The Kremlin sits at the center of Moscow, wrapped in multiple layers of security, intelligence agencies, and air defenses. The Federal Protective Service, FSO, is built specifically to guard Putin, with many backups in how he travels and communicates. Because of that, most realistic capture scenarios look outside central Moscow. One option is to capture him in a third country. After the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin, he sharply reduced his foreign travel. But he did not stop entirely. He still visited Mongolia in 2024 and Hungary in October 2025. If he were to attend another summit in a place like Abu Dhabi, that kind of trip could create a real window of opportunity. In this scenario, the US could position an amphibious assault ship like the USS Iwo Jima offshore, carrying helicopters and special operations forces. The capture would most likely happen during a transfer between the airport and a secure location, when local security is stretched thin and routines are more predictable. Drones and intercepted signals would closely track his movements, just as they did with Maduro. A second scenario depends on instability inside Russia. By late 2026, the economy is under heavy pressure. Interest rates sit around 16%, inflation is high, and the military is burning through older Soviet-era equipment in Ukraine. In that environment, a faction within the Russian elite might decide that removing Putin is the only way to avoid a deeper crisis. If that happened, the US could quietly coordinate with this faction, helping disrupt loyalist air defenses while insiders handle the political side. Delta Force helicopters could extract Putin from a retreat like Valdai, where he often stays outside Moscow, with the operation publicly framed as legal or humanitarian rather than a coup. The most extreme option is a Venezuela-style intervention, but much larger, involving over 150 aircraft striking air defense sites across northern Russia and inserting Delta Force directly into a presidential compound. Ground time would likely be limited to 2 or 3 hours before extraction to a secure facility in a neighboring NATO state such as Poland or the Baltic countries. This would be the riskiest path, but it follows a playbook Washington has already demonstrated it's willing to use. It's important to note that no capture plan would likely succeed without Ukraine. Why, you may ask? Well, Ukrainian military intelligence, known as HER, has proven it can operate deep inside Russian-controlled territory. Special units like the Freedom of Russia Legion have already penetrated several kilometers behind Russian lines in the Kharkiv region, targeting logistics, command posts, and communications. For a mission against Putin, Ukrainian agents would be critical for real-time intelligence. They could track his movements, identify decoys, and map the inner workings of the Kremlin's security apparatus. Western satellites and drones provide broad surveillance, but human intelligence on the ground fills in the decisive gaps. During the operation, Ukrainian special forces could carry out coordinated sabotage across Russia, disrupting power grids, communication towers, and military command centers to slow any response. The goal is not to win battles, but to create confusion and delay while the US extraction team does its job. There is also the Budanov factor. Kirilo Budanov, head of Ukraine's military intelligence, has reportedly had contacts with Russian figures familiar with Putin's security arrangements. That insight could help predict how Russian forces react in a crisis and exploit internal paranoia inside the Kremlin. Basically, Ukraine provides the forward edge of the operation: local knowledge, infiltration capability, and the ability to disrupt Russian defenses from within. But capturing Putin would not be the end. The consequences would be massive. Inside Russia, the immediate risk is chaos. The country's nuclear forces are built around a centralized command structure. Without a clear leader, competing factions within the military or security services might try to seize control, raising the danger of miscalculation or even unauthorized use of tactical nuclear weapons. The recent expiration of the New START Treaty, the last major US-Russia nuclear arms limit, makes this risk even greater. Internationally, reactions would split sharply. Poland, the Baltic states, and Canada would likely applaud the move and probably provide airspace, logistics, or diplomatic cover. Germany and France would be far more hesitant, fearing Russian retaliation on European soil. Inside NATO, the alliance could fracture between supporters of Washington's hardline and those who see it as reckless. But in general, the move would likely be welcomed within the alliance. China would condemn the capture as a violation of sovereignty, but would likely avoid military confrontation, focusing instead on protecting its economic interests in Russia. Iran and North Korea would react with deep paranoia. North Korea might respond with aggressive missile tests, while Iran would likely harden its own security further. Economically, the shock would hit global markets fast. Energy prices could jump up and down as investors rethink how stable Russia's oil and gas exports really are. And money would likely pour into safer options like the US dollar, the Swiss franc, and gold. If Putin were brought to trial in New York or The Hague, it would be one of the most dramatic legal cases in modern history. He would almost certainly claim he was a prisoner of war, while Washington would argue it had the authority to arrest a war criminal operating beyond international law. In the long run, capturing Putin would mark the end of the post-Cold War era and the start of a new, probably harsher global order. It would show that military power, backed by legal arguments, can reach even the most protected leaders. But it would also blur the line between law enforcement and war. And if you want to see what would happen if China and Russia attacked the US, watch the video you now see on your screen. Thanks for watching.